So imagine writing one of the most transcendent, majestic songs in the entire history of rock music.
Right.
Like a sprawling cinematic anthem about existential dread and life on other planets. And you do it entirely because you were feeling incredibly petty about Frank Sinatra.
It really is just the absolute definition of holding a grudge. I mean, we love to imagine that great art comes from a place of pure, elevated inspiration.
Yeah.
But the reality is often much, much grittier than that.
It really is. The staggering truth behind Life on Mars is that it was born directly out of David Bowie's intense professional jealousy and anger over Frank Sinatra's signature hit, My Way. So today, we are going to explore exactly how that happened. You're listening to Deep Cuts and Deep Thinking.
I'm so excited for this one.
Me too. So in this deep dive, we're tearing into a massive stack of musicological, historical, and biographical sources to really unpack the making of Life on Mars. We are going to discover how one of the most culturally significant, surreal pop art masterworks of the 20th century was constructed as basically an elaborate act of revenge.
It's wild.
I promise you, by the time we finish this, you will never hear this song or Frank Sinatra the exact same way again.
It's just a phenomenal story, you know? And to really understand the architecture of this revenge, we have to start in early 1968.
Okay, set the scene for us.
So picture a 21-year-old David Bowie. He is struggling. He hasn't broken through yet. He's desperately looking for a hit. And he gets commissioned by a music publisher to write an English-language adaptation of a 1967 French pop song called Comme d'habitude.
Okay, let's unpack this. A French pop song. What was the original track actually about?
Well, the original French song was a very mournful, very grounded portrait of a couple trapped in this numbing domestic routine.
Right.
But Bowie decides to take it in a completely bizarre direction. He writes these highly theatrical, melodramatic lyrics about a clown.
A clown?
Yeah.
Seriously?
Yeah, a clown. He titles it Even a Fool Learns to Love, and he actually records a demo of himself singing these clown-themed lyrics right over the original French backing track.
I mean, I can only imagine how that was received by the French copyright holders.
Oh, they flatly rejected it, immediately.
Right.
Yeah, they refused to grant licensing rights to this totally unknown English artist. In fact, industry executives dismissed Bowie entirely, with one famously calling him just a yabo from Bromley.
Ouch. Yabo being a pretty harsh British slang for, a loud, uncultured street kid.
Exactly.
That is a massive, humiliating rejection, but it gets so much worse, doesn't it?
Oh, it does. Shortly after Bowie's version is tossed in the bin, Canadian songwriter Paul Anka happens to hear that exact same French track on the radio.
Oh, man.
Anka buys the English rights, and he completely rewrites the lyrics. He strips away all the French domestic sadness and turns it into this arrogant, triumphant narrative of self-actualization. He calls it My Way.
And he pitches it directly to Frank Sinatra.
Yep.
Sinatra releases it in 1969, and we all know what happens next. It becomes this monumental, global, commercial phenomenon. The exact melody that Bowie had lost out on becomes the defining anthem of the era.
And Bowie was just infuriated by this turn of events. He admitted years later that the success of Sinatra's record made him angry for so long, for about a year.
A whole year of just stewing over it.
Right. But instead of just wallowing in that anger, he resolves to transform that frustration into an act of creative retaliation. He explicitly described Life on Mars as a revenge song.
I just love the sheer spite of this. I mean, imagine you were at work and you create a presentation template. Your boss hates it, rejects it, and calls you a hack.
Yeah.
Then a week later, your coworker takes that exact same template, changes the font, gets a massive promotion, and becomes the CEO.
That's practically what happened.
But Bowie's reaction isn't just to complain. It's like he decided to build an entire rival company just to destroy them out of spite.
That is exactly the dynamic. His goal was to write a conceptual parody. He wanted to match the grandiose, sweeping style of My Way while completely subverting its straightforward, confident message.
Right, taking the wind out of his sails.
Exactly. He famously told Michael Parkinson in an interview in 2002, I think he said, "I thought I can write something as big as that, and I'll write one that sounds a bit like it."
That's so bold.
He even cheekily printed the words "inspired by Frankie" in the liner notes of the Hunky Dory album as this sort of territorial flag.
So how do you musically execute revenge? It's not just about, leaving a snarky comment in the liner notes. You steal the song skeleton, you wear it like a suit, and you make it infinitely more complex.
Yes, the musical architecture here is brilliant because it is deliberately engineered to mimic and then totally dismantle Sinatra's hit.
Okay, break that down for us.
Let's look at the foundation. Bowie intentionally built the verse of Life on Mars upon the exact same descending chromatic bass line that anchors the verse of My Way.
Wait, for those of us who aren't, music theorists, what exactly does a descending chromatic bass line do to the ear?
So think of it as the lowest notes in the song stepping down one half step at a time, moving across the adjacent keys on a piano. It creates this familiar, slightly melancholic descending ladder of sound that pulls you downward.
Okay, so he's using the exact same descending ladder as Sinatra.
Mm-hmm.
Where does the revenge part come in?
What's fascinating here is how the two songs violently diverge from that shared starting point. Sinatra's song relies on a very predictable, jazz-inflected circle of fifths.
Which means it sounds resolving, right?
Exactly. It's designed to project a comfortable, triumphant narrative. It feels grounded. It resolves exactly where your brain expects the chord to resolve.
But Bowie doesn't do that.
No, Bowie radically expands those harmonic boundaries. Starting in the key of F major, Bowie's arrangement completely abandons that predictable resolution. Instead, he executes a sudden chromatic mediant modulation.
A sudden what?
a chromatic mediant modulation, basically leaping unexpectedly up a minor third into a flat major for the pre-chorus.
Hold on. Chromatic mediant modulation. That sounds like a music conservatory textbook. What does that actually feel like to the listener?
It feels like the ground is just vanishing beneath your feet. It's an abrupt harmonic departure that immediately destabilizes your tonal center.
Well, I get it. It's like you're walking down a very familiar, comfortable staircase that's a descending bass line, and you know exactly where the next step is.
Yeah.
But suddenly, gravity shifts 90 degrees, and you're walking on the wall.
Precisely. You think you know where the song is going because your ear is unconsciously remembering My Way, but suddenly the landscape is totally alien.
Wow.
And he does this because it perfectly captures the song's lyrical themes of existential confusion and alienation. By twisting this familiar progression into an unstable, highly complex musical landscape, Bowie transformed a petty act of revenge into a modulating art pop masterpiece.
Which is structurally and emotionally far more complex than the standard he was parodying.
Without a doubt.
So he's engineered this incredibly complex, unstable, harmonic revenge plot on the piano in his living room at Haddon Hall in Beckenham. But translating a sprawling cinematic vision from a piano bench onto magnetic tape is a completely different beast.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
And that requires a monumental studio effort. They record the track on August 6th, 1971 at Trident Studios in London.
Right.
It was intentionally saved for the final day of the Hunky Dory sessions because Bowie and his co-producer, Ken Scott, knew internally that it was the big one.
They wanted everyone warmed up and locked in.
Exactly. And the sheer level of talent in that room is staggering. You have session keyboardist Rick Wakeman, who was given total freedom to create the piano arrangement.
And he nailed it.
He played these incredibly ornate classical-style runs on the studio's famous 1898 Bechstein grand piano. And get this, for creating one of the most famous piano tracks in rock history, Wakeman was paid the standard union rate of just £9.
£9. To put down a foundational piece of 20th century music, that is mind-boggling.
I know.
But wait, we have to talk about the strings because the sources detail how Mick Ronson put this together, and I need you to explain this to me. Ronson is Bowie's phenomenal rock guitarist.
Yes.
But the sources say this was his first time ever arranging for an orchestra, and he wrote this gargantuan string arrangement in the studio bathroom.
Yes, that is completely true.
Yeah.
He was so incredibly under the gun, he literally locked himself in the studio bathroom at 9:40 a.m. on the day of the recording to finish writing the score.
You're kidding.
No, and he emerged handing wet manuscript pages to the players of the BBC Symphony Orchestra.
Wait, stop right there.
Huh.
How does a rock guitarist who has never arranged for an orchestra suddenly know how to write sheet music for the BBC Symphony? Did he just hum the parts to them?
No, he actually wrote the notation. The mechanism behind this is that Ronson, despite being known for heavy guitar riffs, had classical training as a child.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, he played piano and violin, so he possessed the underlying music theory. He just had never applied it on this massive symphonic scale before.
Still, that's insane pressure.
Totally. The classical musicians were initially very skeptical of these long-haired rock guys handing them damp paper, but Ronson commanded the room, and they sight-read it beautifully.
That is just beautiful, terrifying chaos. And underneath all those bathroom-written strings and Wakeman's piano runs, you have Trevor Bolder holding it down with that rising chromatic bass line, pushing the song forward.
Yep.
And drummer Mick Woodmansey playing with a style he later described as John Bonham plays classical music. It all culminates in this massive theatrical tom roll.
And floating above all of that dense, chaotic instrumentation is Bowie himself. He recorded his soaring, dynamic lead vocal in a single, continuous take.
The single take.
Yeah. Ken Scott noted that Bowie was uniquely consistent in that regard. He didn't need to patch together multiple vocal performances.
So they have this incredible lightning in a bottle performance. Everything aligns perfectly. But contrast the soaring perfection of that single vocal take with the grimy reality of a London studio. Because this recording actually captures one of the most famous accidents in pop history.
Yes, the infamous phone ring. At the very end of what was a seemingly perfect take, an unlisted public payphone located in the adjacent studio bathroom unexpectedly rang.
The same bathroom where Ronson wrote the strings.
The very same. And the Newman microphones positioned over the Bechstein piano were incredibly sensitive. They picked up the ringing clear as day, completely ruining the quiet decay of the final piano chord.
Oh, man.
Mick Ronson was absolutely furious. The mics actually captured him bursting into expletives, shouting, "Effing bastard!" right as the take ended.
But if you have a masterpiece and the phone ruins the end, why not just fade the track out 2 seconds earlier during mixing to hide it? Why did they leave the curse and the phone ring on the final album?
Well, they initially did try to record over it, but during the mixing process, Ken Scott realized that the piano decay from the interrupted take hadn't been completely erased from the analog multi-track tape.
Ah, the bleed through.
Exactly. There was this faint bleed through. You could hear the distant ring of the phone, Wakeman's fading piano, and Ronson's muffled curse. And Bowie decided to keep it because he loved the spontaneous theatrical charm.
It adds so much character.
There is this incredible poetic irony at play here. Just as the song sweeps into its grandest cinematic illusion, soaring into the cosmos, the totally mundane ring of a bathroom payphone drags the listener right back down to a grimy London reality.
Because that exact clash between grand cinematic fantasy and mundane, grim reality is the absolute core of the song's lyrics. Let's dive into the surreal narrative of the girl with the mousy hair.
Let's do it.
Now, for years, there's been an internet myth that this girl was Bowie's red-haired ex-girlfriend, Hermione Farthingale. but the sources make it very clear that is false.
Correct. The protagonist is actually a composite figure representing youth disillusionment. The narrative follows this girl as she seeks to escape domestic fights, what the lyrics call a sunken dream, by going to the local cinema.
She just wants a break from it all.
Right, she wants a magical escape. But when she gets there, she finds that the silver screen is just regurgitating the exact same hollow, commercialized life she is trying to run away from.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Think about this in today's terms. This is the 1970s equivalent of modern doomscrolling.
Oh, totally.
You know that feeling when you turn to your phone to escape feeling depressed, only to open an app and find the exact same depressing, commercialized reality being sold right back to you through a targeted algorithm? That is the girl with the mousy hair staring at the cinema screen.
That is a highly accurate modern parallel. The escapism itself has been corrupted by commerce, and Bowie illustrates her disappointment using this brilliant, daddiest, cut-up surrealism.
Explain how that cut-up technique actually works. Is he literally taking scissors to paper?
Yes, often, literally. Influenced by writers like William S. Burroughs, Bowie would physically chop up lines of text he had written or phrases from newspapers and rearrange them randomly.
That's wild.
The goal is to bypass conscious logic and let the subconscious mind create new, jarring associations. That's how you get bizarre, striking imagery like Mickey Mouse has grown up a cow.
It's a sharp critique of capitalism and Disney. The symbol of pure childhood innocence has been turned into a literal cash cow to be milked for corporate profit.
Exactly. And then there's the famous pun, Lenin's on sale again.
Oh, yeah.
It is a masterpiece of phonetic ambiguity. It's a homophonic pun that functions as a dual critique. On one hand, it sounds like John Lennon, the rock icon. On the other, it sounds like Vladimir Lenin, the socialist revolutionary leader.
Wait, I want to challenge that interpretation. Is he actually equating a pop star to a socialist revolutionary? Or is he just playing with words because it sounds clever? That seems like a massive leap.
It's absolutely a deliberate critique. Examining the text impartially, Bowie is not endorsing or attacking either figure's underlying ideology. What he is critiquing is the commodification of both. He's pointing out that whether it's musical counterculture represented by John Lennon or political revolution represented by Vladimir Lenin, the capitalist media machine has turned both into safe, packaged consumer products that are quite literally on sale again.
Ah, I see. So everything's just a product on a shelf.
Yeah.
There's no true rebellion left because the system just sells the rebellion back to you.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the title itself, Life on Mars. It actually has nothing to do with astronomy, does it?
Not directly, no. The phrase was borrowed from the media saturation of the space race at the time.
Right.
Newspapers were constantly running headlines asking if there was life on Mars.
Right.
But Bowie repurposes it into a desperate existential question. While humanity is spending billions looking for microbial life in outer space, the girl with the mousy hair is looking around her world and asking, is there any genuine meaning or empathy or real life left right here on Earth?
It's a profound cultural critique. But surprisingly, this deep message didn't actually hit the mainstream when the album was first released in 1971. It was initially considered a commercial failure.
Yes, the commercial life of the song was significantly deferred. It wasn't until 2 years later that it took off. By 1973, Bowie had exploded into global superstardom as Ziggy Stardust.
Of course.
Riding that massive wave of fame, his label RCA finally released Life on Mars as a UK single on June 22nd, 1973. And this time, it peaked at number 3 on the charts.
And to promote it, they shot the legendary Mick Rock music video. If you've seen it, it's burned into your brain forever.
Oh, absolutely.
It was shot on a tiny budget against this stark, overexposed, pure white background. There are no props, no sets, just Bowie looking incredibly isolated.
And his look is iconic. He is wearing this tailored ice blue suit inspired by Yves Saint Laurent, designed by his friend Freddie Beretti.
It's such a striking visual.
And the makeup by Pierre LaRoche is just unforgettable. A pale, kabuki-style base, bright red lips, and this shocking electric blue eyeshadow that perfectly matches the suit.
It was defiantly fluid, gender-bending aesthetic. He looked like an alien who had just landed on Earth to sing this song. Though, a quick side note to clear up another internet myth, people always say this was Bowie's first color video.
Which is factually incorrect. He had actually shot promotional films in color as early as 1969. But the Life on Mars video is undoubtedly his most culturally resonant early visual.
It cemented the song's massive legacy, a legacy that spans decades and mediums. Barbra Streisand actually recorded a pop ballad cover of it in 1974.
A cover that Bowie publicly called bloody awful and atrocious.
He really didn't hold back, did he?
Not at all. He was fiercely protective of the song's dark, alienated tone and felt her straightforward rendition completely missed the surrealist point.
I love that he defended it so strongly. But the song's impact is undeniable. It inspired a massive hit BBC TV show of the same name. Mattel even released a Barbie doll wearing a replica of that ice blue Beretti suit.
And don't forget the space launch.
Right. In one of the most surreal moments of modern history, in February 2018, Elon Musk launched a Tesla Roadster into orbit, and the car's radio was playing this exact song as it floated through space.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the irony is profound. Life on Mars is a song that explicitly critiques the hollow, manufactured dreams of modern media and consumer capitalism.
Yeah.
Yet, over 50 years, it eventually became one of the most heavily consumed, iconic media products of the 20th century. It became the exact kind of massive cultural spectacle that the girl with the mousy hair was staring at on the silver screen.
That is wild to think about. The critique literally became the product. Well, as we wrap up this deep dive, it's incredible to look back at the journey of this track.
It really is.
It started as a petty act of musical revenge over Frank Sinatra scoring a hit with My Way, and it evolved into a timeless masterwork of existential yearning. A song that asks a question it refuses to answer, perfectly capturing what it feels like to want more out of life than what you're being sold.
This raises an important question, though, if we think about the butterfly effect of it all.
Exactly. I want to leave you, our listener, with this final thought to mull over. Imagine if the French publishers had just accepted Bowie's weird, clown-themed lyrics for Comme d'habitude back in 1968.
It changes everything.
Paul Anka would never have acquired the rights. We would never have gotten Frank Sinatra's My Way. And more importantly, David Bowie would never have been angry enough to write Life on Mars. Two of the 20th century's greatest, most enduring cultural monuments exist solely because a music publisher looked at a 21-year-old kid and called him a yabo.
It proves that sometimes a closed door is the greatest gift an artist can receive.
It really does. If you like this episode, please support the show by liking and subscribing.